Hello everyone, today I would like to talk about the conceptual analysis of positive reinforcement and punishment. So in the following presentations, you will hear me talk about what is the definition of positive reinforcement and different forms of them, and when would it be most effective, and I will also mention both advantages and the drawbacks of using positive reinforcement. Then I will go into talk about the details of punishments, for example, the definition, the different forms, and I will also provide some examples, and we'll also talk about when is it be most effective moment to use the punishments, and as well as the advantages and the drawbacks of using them. And in conclusion, I'll talk about my own suggestions that I think combining two systems together will be the best way to be used in behavioral management. So let's begin. According to Skinner, operant conditioning comprises of both reinforcement and punishment. Reinforcement means increasing a behavior, which is any consequence that increases the occurrence of a particular behavioral responses in future. Actually, both reinforcement and punishment can be positive and negative. In operant conditioning, they do not deem to be something good and bad, when positive refers to inserting something, whereas negative implies you are removing something from a person. So positive reinforcement adds on favorite stimulus to increase or maintain the future frequency of a behavior. For example, a child tidies up her room and is being rewarded with an ice cream. Negative reinforcers take away an aversive or unpleasant stimulus to increase or maintain the occurrence of a response. For example, a child cleans up her room and is rewarded by being required to wash the dishes tonight. To reinforce a certain behavior, stimulus being used usually can be regarded as either primary and secondary, while the former one can be called unconditioned reinforcers, which involves innate reinforcing qualities without learning. For example, like water, food, sleep, sex, and touch are all examples of primary reinforcers. For example, jumping into the swimming pool in summer is a common innate reinforcer for people, because the water would cool a person down as a physical need, and it provides pressure as well. For the later one, it's the conditioned reinforcers, which has no inherent value and meaningful effect on one's behavior, thus requiring pairing and learning with the primary reinforcers. For example, money would be the best example to illustrate a secondary reinforcers. It is useless if we can't use it to exchange for goods that people desire for. So when would it be most effective in using positive reinforcement? The importance of time. It has been proved that positive reinforcement deemed to be very effective if being used appropriately. It is recommended that reinforcement should be delivered enthusiastically and frequently. Positive reinforcement regarded as most effective when it occurs immediately right after the response. The connection between the response and the positive reinforcement decreases with increasing amount of time. Therefore, with long period of elapses among the behavior and the reward, the strength of connection will diminish. Thus, an interfering behavior might have chance to be accidentally be reinforced. Another important factor that is the schedule of reinforcement. Apart from the time that affect the effectiveness of positive reinforcement, the schedule of reinforcement also put an endeavor in it. The two foundational forms of reinforcement schedules are continuous reinforcement and intermittent. And then variable ratio schedules produce high rates of response than the fixed ratio scheduled. And it can be imagined that all the good grades, awards, promotions all might come after an unpredictable number of responses in real-life situations. Hence, they typically do not produce post-reinforcement force, since there is a lack of information upon when the next response produces reinforcement. Therefore, keeping the variable ratio schedule of positive reinforcement most effective. So what are the advantages and drawbacks of using them? Skinner is known for promoting positive reinforcement in his studies, and he stated that from a teacher's perspective, Positive interaction increases when teachers provide positive reactions toward positive behavior, and the amount of time students being timed out diminishes with increasing positive reinforcement as well. Praise is an important element partaking in students' behavior. It should be immediate, frequent, enthusiastic, descriptive, varied, and most importantly must involve eye contact. And from a student's perspective, students are more willing to take part in class when they deem themselves to be behaving appropriately and is appreciated by peers. Conversely, students who are in lack of positive self-concept claim to seek negative reward, voice rude comment upon themselves, enhance and believe in positive comments. So what are the drawbacks of using positive reinforcement? When continuously using positive reinforcement for a long period of time, there might be a potential risk that students might take the delivery of reinforcement for granted. In addition, it's impossible for teachers to consistently reinforce all instances of the desired behavior. And sometimes teachers may become the stimulus for the desired response, meaning that students would only exhibit desired behavior with the presence of that teachers, thus making it hard to fade out and produce dependency and in lack of self-control. Let's talk about punishment. So punishment refers to any change that happened after a response that diminished the occurrence of the behavior in future. And punishment is often mistakenly deemed to be negative reinforcement. However, remember, reinforcement emphasizes on the increasing desired behavior, whereas punishment stresses on eliminating unwanted behavior. So there are different forms of punishments. It can be defined in both positive and negative reinforcement. Positive and negative punishment. Positive punishment means an aversive stimulus will be present after an undesirable behavior occur. For example, when students shout out loud in the middle of the class, the teacher might need the students to stand up, in which he or she might not find it desirable. For negative punishment, it's known as remove some favorable stimulus after exhibiting an undesired behavior. For example, when the student shout out loud in the middle of the class, and the teacher might inform the student that, he might miss out the recess time because of his disturbance. So when is punishment most effective? We need to talk about the contingency of punishments. Its effectiveness relies on the relationship between the response and the punishment. For example, a dog receives an electric shock as a first stimulus each time when it reaches the kitchen area and pushes the gate. Then a clear contingency is set up among the gate punishing and electric shock. The aversive stimulus, which is the electric shock, is contingent on the exhibition of the behavior, thus producing strongest effectiveness. And another factor that will affect its effectiveness is the contiguity of the punishment. It has been proved that punishments deemed to be effective if used appropriately. It is recommended that punishment should be delivered immediately right after the response. The connection between the response and the punishment decreases with the time increasing. Therefore, with a long period of elapses among the behavior and the punishment, the strength of connection will diminish. Thus, a wrong association between the punishment and the unintended behavior may be built. So some of the advantages of using punishment is that it can stop inappropriate behavior immediately and effectively with ethical rights. Another advantages is that punishment is legitimate technique that is justifiable and commendable when it relieves person of even greater punishment that result from their own habitual behavior. So one of the disadvantages of using punishment is that it promotes escape and avoidance behavior, and as well as the students might hide the behavior to not being caught, so that actually he may continue exhibiting at an increasing rate when not being supervised. To conclude, it is with paramount importance to note that reinforcement and punishment are not totally confronted. The introduction of the positive reinforcement is effective in changing the behavior. It develops positive relationship with the learners. Variable ratio schedule of Positive punishment produce a highest rate of response and more resistance to extinctions. However, punishment, on the other hand, is effective in creating short-term changes in behavior. In spite of the fact that there might have a risk of worsening its relationship towards the person providing the reinforcement, as well as evoking aggressive and avoidance behavior, sometimes it is part and parcel to deliver punishment immediately, especially speedy remediation is needed, say when self-injured and harming to others' behavior is exhibited. So, in the long run, I think functional analysis strategies to understand the functions of behavior for the behavior is very important, apart from using both reinforcement and punishment procedures. And also at the same time, it is with prior importance to teach a replacement behavior that serves the same functions as the unwanted behavior. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.